Welcome to the Mom Self-Care Podcast, your safe space to finally focus on YOU. I'm Chari Twitty-Hawkins, your self-care coach for moms, praying wife, and mom of four. And I know that being a Christ-centered mom is such a beautiful calling, but it can be so draining. That's why it's important to make sure you are filling your own cup. On this podcast, we'll discuss practical, holistic self-care strategies to help nurture your mind, body, and spirit. Because a mama who fills her own cup pours that back into her family with true peace and joy. Tune in for honest conversations about motherhood and self-care because you matter too. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Mom Self-Care Podcast. I'm Chari Twitty-Hawkins, your host, and I have with me a special guest, Tammy. Welcome, Tammy.
Hi.
And just to tell you a little bit about her, she is your biblical sexuality queen and your favorite intimacy and relationship coach. She says her passion for love, faith, and connection led her to create the Marriage Lab LLC, where she helps women become whole before marriage. And she also helps couples break routine and stagnation in the marriage bed. So welcome, Tammy.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
All right. Well, I'm excited too, because, I was on your podcast a while back. So
Yes.
I love this topic because, as I've shared with you guys, I talk about self-care in a holistic sense. And part of self-care is your relational self-care. And for those who are married, of course, this is going to be geared towards you. And we have to make sure that we are taking care of our marriages because, of course, we're mamas listening. So guess what? Our children are watching us and they are learning about how they should be doing things. Now, they're not watching us in the bedroom, but, intimacy is more than that, right? So can you share with us what inspired you to start the Marriage Lab?
Oh, God. So many different things. I can start with a couple of years ago. I think it was like maybe 2020. I used to sell products like intimacy products to like faith-based communities. And I would have dozens of these parties, and the parties would be so many people there. And as I'm doing the demos and showing them some of the various products that I'm offering, they would be scared to touch it. They'd be scared to taste it. Like everybody was so timid. And at the end of the parties, when I offered one-on-one, so that we could have like consultations and whatnot, some of these women would come back there and they would cry about their sex lives. They would cry about, things that they were experiencing, or they would tell me that they were not experiencing things at all. Like I've had women who have told me they have been married for 20, 30 years and they have never experienced orgasms. And I'm just like, wow, you've been married for so long. I don't really understand. And so we would get into deeper conversations, and I noticed that it was happening more frequently than others. And so I was like, I have to do something about this because people of faith are struggling through problems that they don't really know how to find answers to. And so I wanted to be a resource for them because I understand what that felt like.
That is so good. That is so good. I love that you used to do those parties. I remember going to those parties. I'm like, what is this?
Yeah, but mine were more faith-based, right? So
right.
It was a little different than what you would see like in a secular environment.
Mm-hmm. So how were they different?
So I would cater to, like there were certain products that I wouldn't sell, right? Like things that you really shouldn't be doing, I wouldn't sell like certain products, or I would create it to be in a faith-based space, just helping people understand why the bedroom is undefiled and what that exactly means, right? Mm-hmm. And so I would cater it to like a more of a biblical context.
Okay, I like
helping people to understand, intimacy and spirituality in the bedroom.
Okay, speaking of biblical sexuality, how do you define that? And how should we approach that as mothers and wives?
Okay, so I love this question because, a lot of times when people think about intimacy, they don't really think about sexual experience, right? But, the Bible somewhere in Matthew, I think it's 7:24, where it says that if you build your house on a solid foundation, it will be able to withstand the test of times. Mm-hmm. Well, when you are in a marriage, you have to also apply that to your sexual life, because your sexual life is going to go through various experiences, various changes, and you have to have it on a solid foundation so that it's able to withstand the test of time, the things you're going to experience. And so when you're thinking about God and his creation, and I always go back to Genesis 1:26, it's one of my favorite scriptures, where God says, let us make man in our own image, right? And I'm thinking about that and I'm explaining it to people. Like, this is the very inception of sexuality, because you're learning something about God, that he's creating us in our image. He's telling us to, go out there, be fruitful, and multiply. But he's also teaching us that he's creating us in his image, right? And so when you're thinking about what that looks like, it's God. He took man from the dust of the ground and he formed us, right? And then out of that, he created a woman. So that basically says that he took his time with us. He was patient with us. He created us out of love. He created us with patience. He created us with kindness and all of the fruits of the spirits. And so when we exhibit that and we apply it to our sexual lives with our spouses, it translates to, we're supposed to treat each other with love, with kindness, with patience, be gentle with one another, right? That's having the ability to understand that there is a foundation that has to be applied to our sexual lives as well. And God is pleased with that. He finds goodness in that. He wants us to express our love for one another because that's what he exhibited. He actually gave us the ability to do something that he does, which is to be able to create and multiply. And these are things that only could be found in God. And when you apply that to your sexual lives, it's like, wow, like it takes it to a whole nother level, right?
Right. I could tell you
Yeah.
love what you do because you
Yeah,
were
I'm sorry.
just smiling and beaming. I
I
love
know.
that.
It's like, his God is so good. When you're thinking about it, you're like, wow, like he did all of that just so that he could show us how much he loves us so that we're able to reflect him on this earth. And a part of that is through our intimacy, the way that we correlate and respond to our spouses.
That is so good. I love that. I love how you correlated the two. I do that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm like, how God treats us, how we should treat our
Yeah.
children.
Exactly.
So that is really good.
Exactly.
So, what are some
Exactly.
common struggles that you find that moms deal with when it comes to intimacy? And then how can they address that?
What I see frequently is wives getting lost in their lives,
Mhm.
and then they put intimacy on the side.
All right.
And so when it's time for, because husbands, and I don't want to make it sound like it's like it's a dire need, but it is a need, right?
Mhm.
For men it is an essential. And so I know I always hear this I people don't like to say this, right? Or they don't like, I'm trying to be sensitive, right? But there is a message out there that says wives are not obligated to have sex with their spouses, right?
Mhm.
And I can understand why that message is said, because when you're thinking about the obligation, when you're relating that to God, it's almost like, why would sex be an obligation if it's something that's to be enjoyed? And
Right.
so the reason why a lot of women feel obligated is because they've made it a chore. It's no longer enjoyable because they have so many things going on in their life. It could be careers, it could be children, it could be work, it could be so many different things. And so when it's time to interact with their spouses, it's almost like they feel pressured or resistant to wanting to do it at all. And
Mhm.
so I think that the common thing that I see is that women are not understanding how to prioritize their sex lives and or I guess I would say balance their lives with their everyday lives and their spouses. So I
Mhm.
think that's a common problem that I see.
Mhm. And how do they address that? What would you recommend they do?
Well, this is where it gets tricky because it's also a two-way street. And so you have to be able to communicate to your spouse, and he has to be in a space where he's able to receive that and understand where it is that you're coming from. Well, I think communication is very important when you are feeling like this is an obligation. It's really addressing, well, why is it an obligation? It's really finding out what is the root of the problem of why I feel like this is an obligation for me to do. Like, what's going on? What am I overwhelmed with? What do I need to let go of? Where do I need help? Because he has to help with that process. If you're feeling overwhelmed with chores, right? You
Mhm.
can't get to, like, by the time you get to the bedroom, you're tired because you just washed the dishes, you did all the cooking, you did all of this, you fed the kids, and you got to
All
clean
right.
the dishes, right? It's having the help so that you don't feel the weight of everything that's happening around you all day long. And so it's important to have a spouse who really can support you and understand exactly, okay, my wife needs relief in this area, let me help her with this, right?
Mhm.
Because that's a form of foreplay. When your spouse helps you with some of the struggles that you have,
Mhm.
like, that's foreplay, right? And so I think it's really the communication with your spouse on, finding out, okay, or letting them know, this is the areas that I'm struggling with. I need help with these areas, and finding a balance on how you can balance each other. But you have to really do a lot of communicating, and then understanding that you have to put your spouse as a priority, right? Like the same way that you prioritize everything else, you need to understand that you have to prioritize your husband as well. And so that means that try to find some balance in your life as well, to see what things that you can manage so that you can make sure that you're being more intentional as it relates to his needs, because his needs are just as important as your needs.
That is so good. That's so good. The communicate, when you kept saying it's going to take a lot of communication, it really is. It really is. Because I know people, we kind of expect our spouses, and this can go both ways. It can be our husbands. I've realized, because we'll have to talk about how wives, your husband can't read your mind. Well, they think the same thing sometimes. Like, she's supposed to know.
Yeah.
Communicating.
Real.
And then that part where you said, that's foreplay. That is. Like, I don't know if men realize that. I'm like, maybe the men need to be listening in. Like, to us, I'm big on TikTok.
Help. Listen.
Right. I'm big on TikTok. So I'm telling people, I'm like, looking at the TikToks, it's funny, but it's true. They're like showing a husband sleeping and stuff. I'm like, oh, yes. Like, yes. That's
exactly.
And it takes some of the stress.
I love those ones too. Yes. Yes, that
is so good.
That's when you have a really good spouse who understands. Yeah.
So communicating. I'll say praying and communicating, because I know before
praying and communication.
Yeah, because I'm like, because I want them to be, receiving of what I have to say, but at the same time, I want to say it in a way that they receive it. Because, I could be
you have to speak to them in the language that they can comprehend in.
Right.
So, yeah, for sure.
Can you share with us the tools and the services that you have for couples to help them deepen their intimacy and connection?
One of the things that I just mentioned is prioritizing, right? I offer a 30-day to deepen your connection. It's a free ebook that I offer. So it's basically taking you through steps to prioritize each other for those 30 days, doing various things so that you can deeper your connection. And so it's basically taking you through that process so that you can learn each other differently, spiritually, physically, and intimately. And so that's one of the tools that I do offer. Like, you could log on my website and you can get that ebook for free. But that's one of the things. I also do coaching. I like to coach wives, help them to understand their process first, because a lot of the times, many problems that they have can be resolved if they view themselves differently. So I really do like to coach wives, help them to understand, and help them to process some of the things that they're going through as well. So that's another tool that I use. Also, as I mentioned, I do sell products as well. Products do vary because it really depends on what it is you're going through. I like to be very specific. So I like to understand, what are some of the common struggles that you're having. For example, it could be something as simple as a wife might be experiencing pain during intimacy, right? And sometimes, pain can be the result of so many different things, but a lot of times, I would say about 80% of the time, sometimes pain can be resolved with something as simple as lubricant, right? And so it's really talking with people and understanding what their needs are, and then tailoring something specific to that need so that I'm able to help them with, whatever it is that they are dealing with.
That's awesome. I love how you talk about you tailor things because there's no blanket solution for everybody. Everybody's different.
Everybody's different, and a lot of people, they struggle mentally, a lot of the sexual issues that many have within the faith-based community, a lot of it is mental. I had this one client where she had been married for a year, and every time she had intimacy with her spouse, she would lock herself in the bathroom and she would cry because she felt like she was sinning during sex. Right? It was kind of like working through the mindset of, why do you even feel this way when this is something that God wants you to do? He wants you to embrace it. A lot of the issues that people do have is mental, is mindset. So.
Girl, we need you in the churches. It was like, they tell us don't have sex before marriage. Don't have sex before marriage. But then
Exactly. The switch
even
doesn't turn off when you get married.
yeah.
Exactly. Because what happens is now you're correlating, sex to a bad experience because of what was projected on you because of the toxic message, right? And it's not meant to be toxic, but I think that what happens in the faith-based communities is they get so caught up in what's going on in society, and they want to scare you away from being intimate before you're married, that they deliver a message and it's a blanket message, but they
Mhm.
don't understand that the way that it's taught, it really impacts you after you get married because that switch just doesn't turn off. And that's a major struggle. That is a
Right.
huge struggle, especially within the church.
Right. I'm like,
Yeah.
we need to start having to transition
You
some
have to have the
way.
transition. I think sex needs to be taught in a way where it glorifies God because he's the one that he created it, right?
Hmm.
The message that is taught to the body is what is being corrupted in the sexual experience. It's not really taught from a level of where, okay, this is a beautiful thing. God wants you to explore, embody, and enjoy these sexual experiences. It's really taught in a toxic way. And I think if people really understood the power of God and intimacy, then they would embrace the message more and they would enjoy it more after they get married,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I am one of those people. Like after I got married, like I'm struggling
Yeah, it
and
was hard. It was
mentally.
struggle. And
It's
and
like,
and to be
mm,
transparent, like I had those struggles also, right? Because prior to marriage, like I was out there. I did a lot of things. And that's because, for transparency, I struggled with a lot of sexual trauma. And so I lived that out for years. And so when it came time for me to get married, it was almost like, okay, before I got married, I was saved for a little bit. And then I was taught, the purity message. I never was taught to actually deal with the trauma that I
mm,
experienced. It was
mm-hmm,
basically, okay, just let it go, shut it down. God healed you, you good. But I never went through a process of, okay, now you got to really understand that this was taken and Satan used this, and now God is trying to glorify this. Now you got to go through the process of, reformatting your brain. And so when I got married, I did all these things in the world, right? But when I get married, I'm like, okay, I don't want to do this because I think I'm sinning. I think I'm doing it. You know what I mean? Like you're
mm-hmm.
afraid to do all these different things. And so you kind of like shut down. I shut down. And so it made sex difficult because I couldn't embrace my spouse the way that I wanted to because I felt like if I did this, I'd be sinning. If I did that,
Right.
I'd be sinning. You know what I mean? But I
Yep.
did all these things when I was not married. And so I had to understand, I had to go and take a deep dive for myself and be like, okay, God, like what does sex look like in marriage? Like what is the difference? I had to really go through that process of reformatting my brain to help me to understand God's design for what sex is supposed to be like in marriage. And that
Mm-hmm.
was that was a long process. That was a long process. So I understand how that feels. I understand how that purity message hit. And I understand, that there is an actual process that you have to go through in order to reframe your mindset so that you can fully embrace your spouse the way that God intends.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, that sound like a keynote right there. That sound like a keynote speech. Wait a minute. That is so true. Reformatting your brain. That is so
Yeah,
true. It is a process.
it's a process. But once you do embrace that, the sex level just it evolves,
Yeah,
right?
it does. It does.
It evolves, and then that shows up in various areas of your life. you
Hmm.
know you're not viewing sex as an obligation anymore because
Yeah.
now you're enjoying the time that you spend with your spouse. And one of the things that I love about God is, he talks about somewhere, I think it's in Ephesians chapter 5 somewhere, where he's like, there are some mysteries when you and your spouse come together. He
Mm.
reveals mysteries to you, right? My favorite quote that I always love is by a theologian. His name is John Piper. And he says that the ultimate reason why we are sexual is to make God more deeply known. And so you think of exactly, right? It's like, pow, right? So when
Okay.
you're thinking about that, and you're like, man, that is so true. Like God is revealing mysteries that you cannot discover unless you are intimate with your spouse. You
Mm.
understand? He's revealing himself to you. There are things about God that you will not know until you embrace your spouse. And you do that by being vulnerable. You do that by being transparent. You do that by allowing, when you two connect, to just become so consumed and so deeply involved with each other that you're like, man, God is so good. You know how it is when you go to church, right? And you are in praise and worship, right? And the praise and worship singer, the leader, is like, man, this is so good. Like, it's taking you in, and then you start worshiping God more. You're not worshiping the leader, but you're worshiping God.
Right.
It's like the same thing when you are intimate with your spouse. Like when you are when you are compersed in your spouse, that's a form of worship. And it's almost like, man, I'm so into my spouse. Like, I'm just thanking God because this experience is just so good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people need to view sex like that. They need to understand, like, man, like when I connect with my spouse, it's not an obligation. This is actually something that can help me relieve the stress. This is actually something that can help me deal with the things that I'm going through. Julie Slattery, I think that's her name. She's a sexologist, and she did some research, and I'm not sure if she did research, but she spoke about some research one time where when you come together with your spouse and something as simple as being joined, and when his semen is, you know, secreted in you, they found research where that is an actual stress relief, an antidepressant, right? So the more you engage with your spouse, it relieves you of stress. It acts as an antigen, right? To build up so that you are not depressed.
Shut up.
You know
What?
what I'm saying? I'm telling you, that's actually research that's out there.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it just speaks so highly of God and his oneness, right? There's also research out there that the more you engage with your spouse, let's say that you're pregnant, right? The more that you engage with your spouse, research actually shows that you are less likely to develop certain things like preeclampsia. You are less likely to miscarry and deliver your baby to full term, right? Speaks about God's oneness. Like, he designed you to be intimate with your spouse because it controls so many various things. Think about, you know, when you both are in the world and you're fighting this and you're fighting that. When you come together, that acts as a defense mechanisms so that you now are built up. You feel stronger, right? You feel like you can face the world because now you guys are in warfare together. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so many different things. It's like, it's so important when you're thinking about God and intimacy. And I think so many times we leave God out of the process because it sounds like crazy that God should we should really invite God into that experience. But there's so much power when we do, right? So
Wow.
girl, I'm just over here just like, man, just thinking about it, like, God is just so good.
I'm learning some stuff today. Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, and can you tell us about Hey God, Can We Talk?
Okay, yeah, sure. Hey God, Can We Talk is a devotional that I just created, and I literally just started, like, I think last month. So it's something that's fairly new. It's a new devotional that I did. It was for the new year, right? I just released it. And it's basically a devotional to help women become whole before marriage. And what it does is it takes you through a process so that you can get to full transformation. So it's a transformational journal, workbook, devotional, all of the things. So in the devotional, it has like coloring pages, you know, because sometimes, you know, like me, my mind be all over the place. So I need coloring pages, I need activities, I need things to stay involved and stay focused. I created a devotional. It's 12 steps, 12 actionable steps to get you to that place of transformation. So it's helping you understand who you are, because so many women struggle with them not being enough, right? And then it helps you to identify some of the pain points in your life, like what's stopping you from becoming your full authentic self, right? So it helps you to identify some of your pain points. It helps you to see God as his image, in his image, the way that he created you. And then it takes you through a process of going through that transformation. And I think it's a very important devotional for pretty much everybody to have, because it is going to walk you through those steps of realizing that, you know, God has purposed you for something. And sometimes you might not understand exactly what that purpose is. And so as you go through your journey of transformation, you'll be able to discover that in the process. So that's what Hey God, Can We Talk is. It's basically teaching you how to communicate with God so that, you know, he can reveal things to you. So talking to God more.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, and I ask all my guests this: what is your favorite form of self-care?
My favorite form of self-care is I like to travel. So I travel once a month
Oh, go
somewhere.
ahead.
I do. I travel. I love to get on a plane and go different places. So I try to go at least once a month. And that's how I like to step away from everything and everyone so that I
Mm-hmm.
can think and focus. Because what I realized, I think it was probably during the time when I had you on my podcast, I was, I have two little ones. They're 6 and 5 now, but I think they were a lot younger. Well, obviously they were a lot younger then, and I didn't know how to find that balance, and I was getting consumed in motherhood and not being able to, have time for myself, and I was getting so lost. Like I experienced mommy burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, what can I do so that I can make sure that I show up as my full self, and not be so irritated and starting to feel depressed all the time. And because I was honestly losing myself. And so I was like, okay, I'm an introvert and I recharge by being alone. Okay. So I needed to, even if it's just a day, sometimes I just go away for a day, sometimes 2 days max, right? And I just take those moments and then I just recharge myself. Like, I don't want to be bothered. Like, just allow me to just find myself in these 2 days so that I can refresh and relax. And so now that's my favorite thing to do is just travel once a month
That's
and
awesome.
just go away. Even if it's just for a day, I would do that.
That
Hmm.
is so awesome. I love it. I want to be like you when I grow up.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I do now. I do
That's
now. I have
awesome.
to. I have to.
I love
So,
that.
and the reason also too is because if I don't never go away, I'll never be able to get away from my kids. If I'm here, they're still gonna be bothered. But if they realize, okay, no, she's gone, then they
Mhm.
won't bother me at all. And so
Right.
I realized that that's how I have to show up. That's the only way that I can get a break. And so now
Okay.
I'm here. I'm always present. I'm active now. Like, I got life. I got energy that I can pour into them.
Hmm.
So that's what I have to do. That's my self-care.
That's awesome. I love it. I love to travel too.
Yeah. Yes.
All
And
right.
a
Well,
plane.
she said, get on a plane. Where can our listeners find out more about you, like your website or social media?
Okay, my website is yourmarriagelab.com. And on social media, you can find me. My @ handle is the Marriage Lab LLC. And I think that's the same across the board. So wherever the Marriage Lab LLC, you'll be able to find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tammy, for helping us to
Thank you for
hopefully.
having me.
My pleasure. It is my pleasure. You're helping me too. But
I'm
thank
glad. I'm glad. My goal is to get into like different churches and do workshops and, help people with, understanding God and sexuality. But
Mhm.
I think a lot of churches don't really understand how to do that yet. But I'm getting in there, girl. I'm getting in there because
Yes,
it's needed.
that's that
It's
transition we
needed.
were talking about. They need that
It's that
transition.
transition. It's that transition.
Awesome. Well, ladies, I hope this bless you and help you to understand intimacy. Make sure you check out her website and her social media. I'll have that down in the description as well. But thank you again, Tammy.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. All right, ladies. Well, take care. Take care of those marriages. Do the work you need to do within yourself and communicate with your spouse. Make sure you save this episode and share with the mom you love and leave a review if this blessed you. Until next time, take care. God bless.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining me for the Mom Self Care Podcast. I hope you feel inspired to make yourself a priority too. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Share this podcast with another mama you love and leave a review. Also, feel free to let me know what you would like to hear about in future episodes by visiting me on Instagram at CIC Inspire Me. Until next time, take some time to take care of YOU because you matter too.